This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Aloha! Thank you all for coming this evening to the monthly public presentation of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Since 1990, the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education. Now, as a VSH member, you might also enjoy attending our VSH Imagine a Vegan World Support Group meetings any Tuesday, except this one, of course, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. For more details, please see Terry Bear. Terry, where are you? There she is, in the third row on the side. So please do see her if you'd like to join this wonderful group. Now, please be sure to stay after tonight's talk to enjoy samples of vegan dishes donated by the generosity of Down to Earth. I think you'll really enjoy them. It is now time for our special guest. We're delighted to welcome back Dr. Michael Greger, MD, a founding member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Michael Greger, MD, is a physician, author, and internationally recognized speaker on nutrition, food safety, and public health issues. He has lectured at the Conference on World Affairs, testified before Congress, and was invited as an expert witness in the defense of Oprah Winfrey in the infamous meat defamation trial. He is a graduate of Cornell University School of Agriculture and Tufts University School of Medicine. Currently, Dr. Greger serves as the Director of Public Health and Animal Agriculture at the Humane Society of the United States. Hundreds of his nutrition videos are freely available at nutritionfacts.org, which is added to daily. His presentation tonight is entitled, "The Role of Diet in Preventing, Treating, and Reversing the 15 Leading Causes of Death." Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Greger.
Good evening. For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world, so you don't have to. Every year my talks are brand new because every year the science is brand new. I then compile the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical results into new videos I upload every other day to my website, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There's no ads, there's no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything, just put it up as a public service, the latest in nutritional science every other day. For those who've seen some of my presentations in the past, you've known that I've addressed some of the most pressing dietary issues of our time, like what's the healthiest variety of apple, for example, or the most nutritious nut, or the best bean, the best berry, the best bowel movement. Remember this from last year? Who's number one and number two? Well, it wasn't the New Yorkers, if you remember, the most constipated population ever studied in the nutrition literature, outputting a mere 3 ounces a day, maybe if they just eat a big apple once in a while. But I thought this year I'd lighten it up and ask, what's the best way to prevent death? Every year the CDC compiles the top 15 causes of death in the United States, so I thought I would just go through the list, 1 through 15, and talk about the latest science on the role diet may play in preventing, treating, and even reversing our top 15 killers. Number 1 on the list, heart disease. Number 1 cause of death for both men and women. The 35-year-old follow-up of the Harvard Nurses' Health Study was recently published. And now the most definitive study in older women's health, following more than 100,000 women for decades. And in that time, because it was such a large study, which has been going on for so long, thousands of participants have died, but that allows us to study the risk factors for mortality. Because the number 1 cause of death for these women was heart disease, no surprise that dietary cholesterol was a risk factor for death. The second leading cause of death was smoking-related cancers. What's so nice about this study, and the reason I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, is because it's what's called a competing risks analysis, which allows one to compare different risks to one another. So, for example, eating the amount of cholesterol every day found in a single egg appears to shorten a woman's life as much as smoking 5 cigarettes a day every day for 15 years. That's 20,000 cigarettes. And this was supported recently by the study out of Canada, got a little press you may have heard about, that found a similar exponential increase in risk in terms of plaque building up in people's carotid arteries for both pack years of smoking. Right here, this is 40 years of pack-a-day smoking, and a similar exponential increase for the number of eggs one eats per week. The most protective dietary factor found was fiber consumption. Eating just a single bowl of oatmeals, a cup of oatmeals worth of fiber every day appears to extend a woman's life as much as jogging 4 hours a week. No reason you can't do both, though. But I think it's important to take a step back and realize, okay, well, the one dietary factor most associated with living a shortened life, cholesterol, only found one place, and that's in animal products. The one dietary component found associated with living the longest life, fiber, only found in one place, and that's whole, unprocessed plant foods. The single food associated with the longest lifespan was nut consumption. 2 servings of nuts a week, 2 ounces of nuts a week, also appeared to give you that 4 hours of jogging benefit a week. You say, yeah, heart disease, number 1 cause of death, but what if your cholesterol's normal? I get that a lot from first-time patients. I have to kind of break it to them that, look, having a normal cholesterol in a society where it's normal to drop dead of a heart attack, right? It's our number 1 killer, not necessarily a good thing. In this massive study released recently of heart attack victims, these are people that had a heart attack, turns out that almost 3/4 of them fell within the recommended targets for LDL, or so-called bad cholesterol, demonstrating the current guidelines may just not be low enough. In fact, close to half had cholesterol levels classified in the guidelines as optimal, though I'm not sure their orphaned children and grieving spouses will take much solace in that fact. What's considered optimal is still too high. Sure, having a below average cholesterol can lower your risk, but we don't want low risk, we want no risk. How do you do it? Well, as the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Cardiology wrote more than a decade ago, maybe it's time to start shifting from just decreasing risk to putting an end to this epidemic. What does he recommend? He says, well, for the progression of this disease to stop, it appears that our total cholesterol needs to be lowered down to about the 150 area. In other words, we all need to have a total cholesterol lowered to that of your average pure vegetarian or vegan. Of course, he goes on to say, because relatively few people are willing to eat like that, let's put everybody on drugs, put it in the water supply, etc., etc. But bottom line is our choice, diet or drugs. Why not choose the drugs? Legitimate question. Well, there's been newly mandated FDA safety warning labels now on these so-called statin drugs like Lipitor, Mevacor, Crestor, Vytorin, etc. New side effect warnings relating to brain-related side effects such as memory loss and confusion, as well as an increase in blood sugar levels and new onset diabetes. As one prominent cardiologist described this Faustian bargain, sure, fewer heart attacks on these drugs, but more cases of diabetes. The latest concern about new side effects relate to energy loss and fatigue, particularly for women, even at modest doses of these drugs. You know, the memory loss and confusion caused by these drugs, people may have forgotten, it's actually a way to lower your risk of heart disease and diabetes at the same time. It's called a plant-based diet. Now, cholesterol is just half of the heart disease story. The other half is inflammation. We have known for 15 years now that a single meal of animal products, sausage and egg McMuffin were used in the original study, can paralyze our arteries, cutting their ability to relax in half within just hours after consumption. Our entire vascular tree gets inflamed and stiffened, and just as this inflammatory crippled state starts calming down, 4, 5, 6 hours later, lunchtime, we may whack our arteries with another load of meat, eggs, or dairy, such that most Americans are stuck in this chronic state of low-grade inflammation, which can increase their risk of inflammatory diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers, one meal at a time. Does the same thing in our lungs, inflammation in our airways. We're talking about internal damage, not just kind of years down the road, but literally within minutes or hours of it going into our mouth that day. Now, it turns out it's not the animal protein, which is the cause of certain inflammatory arthritis problems. It's not the animal fat, which is what we originally thought. Well, it's not the animal fat, not the animal protein. What is it? Well, I have a series of videos talking about this really interesting detective story of how, over the last 15 years, researchers finally came upon the answer, but I'll just kind of cut to the chase. Spoiler alert. When people eat animal products, they suffer from what's called endotoxemia. Their bloodstream becomes awash in bacterial toxins called endotoxins that are present in the animal products. So these dead meat bacterial toxins aren't destroyed by stomach acid, aren't destroyed by proteolytic enzymes in the digestive tract, aren't destroyed by cooking. These bacterial toxins found to be highly resistant to cooking, as well as our best attempt at acid and enzyme digestion. They tried boiling meat for hours, didn't make any effect. So I'm not talking about food poisoning, right? The bacteria are dead, but the toxins are actually part of the bacterial cell wall, live on, and can trigger inflammation. And then the animal fat actually does play a profound role by increasing the absorption of these bacterial toxins into our system. Basically, animal products, meat, eggs, and dairy, are in many cases so packed with bacteria that can trigger inflammation, dead or alive, even if they're fully cooked, and then the saturated fat within those products can then ferry these toxins through the gut wall into our bloodstream. So, now that we know what's going on, well, what do we do about it? Well, this is from the latest 2012 review by the leading research team. Well, the obvious solution to this metabolic endotoxemia would be to reduce saturated fat intake, but they go on to say, the Western diet just not conducive to this mode of action. It's difficult for patients to comply with this request. So what? Don't even tell them? Right? It's that kind of patronizing attitude I find among too many of my medical colleagues that, people will never stop smoking, they'll never start eating healthy, so why even bring it up? That attitude may actually be one of the true leading causes of death. But let me go back to the official list and take on cancer next. What's the latest? Well, the largest prospective, meaning forward-looking study ever on diet and cancer in human history found that the incidence of all cancers combined lower among those eating meat-free diets compared to those that eat meat. And particularly striking was the rates of lymphoma and leukemia among meat eaters compared to vegetarians. Really the fastest growing tumors, these so-called liquid cancers. And of all the animal products they tested, poultry consumption was actually the worst. So we're talking about a tripling of risk for every just 50 grams of poultry consumption. That's like a quarter of a chicken breast a day, may triple our risk of these sorts of cancers. In fact, the link between meat and cancer is such that even the journal Meat Science published an article recently asking, should we become vegetarians or can we make meat safer? What they're talking about, there's a number of dietary additives that they're experimenting with to suppress, for example, the toxic effects of the blood-based iron that's in meat. Now, these additives are still kind of under study, but could provide what they call an acceptable way to prevent cancer, because obviously reducing meat consumption completely out of the question. They fear that should the National Cancer Institute recommendations to decrease meat consumption, should they be adhered to, sure, cancer incidence may be reduced, but farmers in the meat industry would suffer important economical problems. Now, for those of us more concerned about the suffering caused by the meat industry rather than the suffering of the meat industry, what happens if you put cancer on a vegan diet? The Pritikin Research Foundation has this elegant series of experiments, simple experiments. You take people, put them on different diets, you draw their blood, and then you just drip their blood on human cancer cells growing in petri dish to see whose blood is better at suppressing cancer growth. They're the ones that work with Dr. Ornish to find that the blood circulating within the bodies of vegans dramatically less hospitable to cancer. Now, even the blood of those eating the standard American diet can suppress cancer growth, otherwise we'd all be dead. It's just that the blood of those eating vegan fights cancer about 8 times better. So the blood of those on a standard American diet suppresses cancer growth by about 9%, but the blood circulating within vegans really just kind of cleans up. Now, this was with men. This was after 12 months on a plant-based diet, men and prostate cancer. Researchers wanted to repeat this study using women and breast cancer, but they didn't want to wait a whole year to get the results. Women are dying now, #1 cancer killer among young women. So they said, well, let's see what a plant-based diet can do after just 2 weeks, after 3 different types of human cancer cells. Here's the before picture, cancer cell growth rate powering away at 100%, and then this is after 2 weeks of eating healthy. Here's kind of a representative image of a layer of breast cancer is laid down in a petri dish, and then the blood of those women eating a standard American diet is dripped on that cancer. And as you can see, even the blood of women eating crappy diets can kind of break down some of the cancer. But then you take these exact same women, so they act as their own control, these same women, put them on a plant-based diet for about 12 days, and their blood can do this. Now, suppressing cancer growth is nice, getting rid of it is even better. This is what's called tunnel imaging. This measures DNA fragmentation or cell death, cancer cell death. When cancer cells die, they release light. And so, as you can see, the blood of your average woman can kill off a few cancer cells, but put those same women on a plant-based diet for 2 weeks, and their blood can do that. This is what's called apoptosis, a programmed cancer cell death. Their bodies were able to kind of reprogram the cancer cells to force them into early retirement before and after. It's like you're an entirely different person inside. The blood circulating within the bodies of these women gained the power to significantly slow down and stop breast cancer growth after just 2 weeks of a plant-based diet. Kind of raises the question, well, what kind of blood do we want in our body? Right? What kind of immune system? Right? Do we want blood that just kind of rolls over when new cancer cells pop up? Or do we want blood circulating to every nook and cranny in our body with the power to slow down and stop it? Now, this dramatic improvement in cancer defenses was after 2 weeks of a plant-based diet and exercise. They had these women out walking between 30 to 60 minutes a day. We say, wait a second, if you did 2 things, how do you know diet had anything to do with it? Maybe the exercise is the reason that their bodies were so successful at suppressing cancer growth. All right, so researchers put it to the test. This is what we saw before. So this is apoptosis, cancer cell death, cancer cell clearance. This is what we saw before in the diet and exercise group. This group, 14 years on a plant-based diet, along with mild exercise, just like out walking every day. Compare the cancer-stopping power to your average sedentary meat eater, which is essentially non-existent. All right, but this group in the middle is the interesting group. And it's a wild story involving little people and big big dogs and little dogs. And marshmallows, Tinker Toys, human cannibalism, and vegan bodybuilders. Everything from beefsteak to beefcake. It's a fascinating story. I encourage you to go to my website and check it out. But I'll just cut to the chase here. The answer to the puzzle is IGF-1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is a cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in all stages of cancer promotion, invasion, survival, metastases, and spread. And if you start eating healthy, if you go on a plant-based diet for a few weeks, your levels of IGF-1 drop. And if you go on a plant-based diet for years, your levels drop even further. You continue to accrue benefits. And your levels of IGF binding protein go up. That's one of our ways our body protects itself from cancer, protects itself from excessive growth by releasing a binding protein into our bloodstream to tie up any excess IGF-1. It's like our body's emergency brake. One really needs to kind of go towards eliminating animal protein from one's diet altogether to get this advantage. The good news is, look, based on what we know, a healthy vegan diet may be profoundly protective with respect, for example, preventing breast cancer in older women. Killer number 3, well, the top 3 killers used to be heart disease, cancer, and stroke. That's so 2011. Now, as of last year, heart disease, cancer, and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, lung diseases like emphysema. Thankfully, a plant-based diet can be used to help prevent COPD and can even be treated with plants. This is really exciting work. Normally, with emphysema, we just thought you get worse, then you die. If adding fruits and vegetables to one's diet can help prevent emphysema, wouldn't it be simpler to just add them to cigarettes? And indeed, the addition of acai berries to cigarettes evidently has a protective effect against emphysema in smoking mice. Who would have known, right? Next, they're going to start adding, berries to meat. And indeed, I couldn't make this stuff up. Adding fruit extracts to burger patties was not without its glitches. For example, the blackberries seem to kind of dye the burger patties with a distinct purplish color that kind of turned people off. Though you evidently can improve the tenderness of lamb carcasses if you infuse them with kiwi fruit juice before rigor mortis sets in. You can even improve the nutritional profile of frankfurters by adding powdered grape seeds, though there were complaints that the grapeseed particles were kind of visible in the final product. And if there's one thing we know about hot dog eaters, it's that they're picky about what goes in their food. Pig anus, okay, but grape seeds, ew. Next leading killer is stroke. Stroke prevention is all about eating potassium-rich foods. Potassium, from the words pot ash. You take any plant, put it in a pot, reduce it to ash, add water, skim off the ash, reduce it down, you're left with the right residue called potash. Yum, potassium, that's how they got the name. Who can name a plant food particularly high in potassium? Bananas, right? It's like the one thing everybody seems to know about nutrition. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe Chiquita had a good PR firm or something. But I joke that you could walk into the Heart Attack Grill in Vegas where they're eating things like this. In fact, their second spokesperson just died of a heart attack. And, ask anybody, they'd be like, I don't know what to eat, but I know bananas got potassium. Like, that's one thing everybody knows. Turns out, bananas don't even make the top 50 sources of potassium, coming in at number 86, right behind fast food vanilla milkshakes. It goes fast food vanilla, then bananas. In terms of whole foods, it's greens, beans, and then dates. Again, bananas down at 86. In fact, if you look at the next leading cause of death, bananas could be downright dangerous. Next, Alzheimer's disease. You know, 3 years ago, Alzheimer's was our 8th leading cause of death in this country. 2 years ago, it was our 7th leading cause of death in this country. And last year, the latest year we have statistics, it is our 6th leading cause of death, 4 million Americans afflicted. We have known for decades that people who eat meat, whether red meat, white meat, doesn't matter, between 2 to 3 times the risk of becoming demented. And the longer you go without eating meat, the lower your risk falls. But again, known about that for decades. What's the latest, kind of the exciting new research is on treating Alzheimer's with natural plant-based remedies such as the spice saffron, which beat out placebo and seem to work as well as the leading pharmaceutical drug. Next on the list, diabetes, which, as I mentioned, can be prevented with a plant-based diet, can be treated and cured in many cases with a plant-based diet. Here's the latest stats out of the Adventist II study, the largest study of vegetarians and vegans ever in North America, in fact, anywhere in the world. Compared to those that eat meat, those that cut out all meat except fish may or may not have a lower risk of diabetes. Those that cut out all meat certainly do, but vegans seem most protected. And critically, this is after weight factored out, after controlling for weight. You say, well, of course, vegans have less diabetes. They're so skinny on average. But no, this is even after adjusting for weight. So even at the exact same weight, vegans have just a fraction of the diabetes risk. But that does kind of raise the question, why are vegans on average so slim? This is what we see here in the United States. The average BMI, 28.8. The average American's overweight. Even the average vegetarian in the United States is overweight. Only the vegans are the only dietary group that are on average not overweight. They used to call this normal weight, no longer normal. Now they just call it ideal weight. And so this is about a 36-pound difference for the average height American. So about a 36-pound difference between average meat eater and average vegan. Why? I mean, researchers have been kind of desperate to kind of figure out their secret. Vegetarians do eat fewer calories every day, but I mean, not that many fewer. For a 36-pound difference. So over the years, I've talked about some of the theories that have arisen. So you may remember this. So maybe those eating plant-strong diets, it's because they express more of this fat-shoveling enzyme in little power plants or mitochondria to our cells, something of an enzyme called carnitine palmitoyl transferase, upregulated by about 40% in vegetarians. Maybe they have different gut flora, different populations of gut bacteria that handle energy differently. Maybe just because they're avoiding these so-called obesogens, these obesogenic chemicals that may build up in the meat supply. There's even an obesity-causing virus in poultry that may be playing a role. Here's the latest theory. Maybe it's the propionate. Well, what's found in plant foods, never in animal foods? Fiber. Animals have bones to hold them up. Plants have fiber to hold them up. Well, you say, wait a second, I thought fiber was defined as our inability to digest it. Well, we can't digest fiber, but the gazillions of good bacteria within our gut can. What do they make with it? They make propionate, which then gets absorbed from our colon into our bloodstream, circulates within our body. What does it do? Well, it inhibits cholesterol synthesis. That's kind of nice. And also has what's called a hypophagic effect, an appetite-suppressing effect, because it delays the speed at which food empties from our stomach. And so whether it's because it helps regulate food intake, or at least in a petri dish, actually prevents the formation of new fat cells. We don't know if that actually happens in the person, but either way, it has an overall anti-obesity effect. How can we boost the numbers of good bacteria, these good bacteria in our guts without probiotic? By eating vegetarian, because we're feeding our little friends with fiber. Also, animal products are calorically dense. To burn off the calories found in a single pat of butter, or margarine for that matter, one would have to add 700 yards to one's evening stroll. Or a quarter-mile jog for every sardine you put in your mouth, and that's just kind of the edible part. And anyone who wants to eat 2 chicken legs better get out on their own 2 legs and run an extra 3 miles that day to burn off the calories. Maybe people who are slender start eating healthy and not the other way around. This is after controlling for energy intake, after controlling for calories. Meaning if you have two people eating the exact same number of calories, the person eating more meat may gain more weight. In fact, they even calculated how much more. So for example, if you ate a steak every day, it would lead to an annual weight gain 422 grams higher than the weight gain experienced if you ate the exact same number of calories, but just less meat. And over a few years, you could gain a couple pounds because of that. And steak was nothing. The strongest relationship with annual weight gain was for poultry consumption. So for example, if you ate a burger every day, this is how much excess weight you'd gain in addition to the calories actually found in that burger. Processed meat is worse, so if you eat a ham sandwich that has the exact same number of calories as the hamburger, you'd actually gain more weight than if you just ate the hamburger. But here's chicken. This is a half a chicken breast a day. This is the additional weight gain above and beyond the calories that are actually found in that chicken. They conclude, not surprisingly, our results indicate meat intake associated with weight gain. This is after adjusting for calories, therefore, of course, in favor of the public health recommendation to decrease meat consumption for public health improvement. What did the National Cattlemen's Beef Association have to say about that study? It's a funny story. Don't have time to go into it, but please feel free to check it out. As well as a workplace intervention. Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Dr. Barnard, went to Geico corporate headquarters and instituted a workplace intervention that was wildly successful. And anyone's interested in that kind of occupational health, that's the video I would suggest you looking at. Next on the list, kidney failure, which you can help prevent with a plant-based diet, can even treat with a plant-based diet. Why? Because kidneys are highly vascular organs. That's why they look so red when you cut them open. And so if the standard American diet is so toxic to arteries in our heart, brain, and pelvis, causing heart attacks, strokes, and sexual dysfunction respectively, what might it be doing to our poor kidneys? Long story short, Harvard researchers found 3 dietary components associated with failing kidney function, and only 3 dietary components. What they were measuring was protein loss in the urine. We're not supposed to be losing protein in urine. When you do start losing protein, that's a sign that your kidney function is starting to fail. What were those 3 risk factors? Number 1 risk factor, animal protein. Number 2, animal fat. Number 3, cholesterol. Right? It was not overall protein intake, not overall fat intake, but specifically animal protein, animal fat. All 3 of those, of course, only found one place, and that's in animal foods. Next on the list, wait a second, what could diet have to do with influenza, pneumonia? Obviously, you haven't seen my video, Kale and the Immune System, talking about the immunostimulatory effects of kale. Is there anything kale cannot do? So for example, in my video, Boosting Immunity Through Diet, they took older men and women right before they were getting their pneumonia vaccination, their Pneumovax vaccination, split them up into 2 groups. Half ate their regular diet and half added just a few servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And what did you see? This is the protective antibody response in response to the pneumonia vaccination, significantly boosted by doing one simple little thing, just adding some fruits and vegetables to their diet. Killer number 10 in the United States is suicide. If you remember from my presentation last year, I talked about the study out of Loma Linda that found, again, snapshot in time, that meat eaters have a significantly deteriorated mood compared to vegetarians, more anxiety, more depression, more stress. Take people in the standard American diet, remove meat, remove fish, remove poultry, also removed eggs in this study, because they thought it was the arachidonic acid inflaming the brains of meat eaters, found predominantly in chicken and eggs. What they found was a significant improvement in mood within just 2 weeks. Right? I mean, it can take drugs like Prozac months to take an effect. Significant improvement within just 2 weeks of the dietary change. What might diet have to do with systemic blood infections? Well, certainly there are certain foodborne bacteria that can invade the bloodstream through the intestinal wall, or in women can crawl up into their bladder. Let's go one step back. Where do those bacteria come from? Well, now we have direct DNA fingerprinting proof that the reservoir for these extra-intestinal, meaning outside of the intestine, disease-causing E. coli come from, and that's from chicken. Women that eat chicken or even just prepare chicken colonize their gut with these bladder infection-causing bacteria, which can then later creep up into their bladder and may cause literally millions of urinary tract infections, the second leading cause of infection, second leading type of infection after the common cold. Say, wait a second. You cannot sell unsafe toys. You can't sell unsafe cars. I mean, how is it even legal to sell unsafe meat? Well, they do it by blaming the consumer. This is quoting a USDA poultry microbiologist who said, raw meats are not idiot-proof, right? They can be mishandled, and when they are, it's like handling a hand grenade. You pull the pin, someone's going to get hurt. Now, while some may question the wisdom of selling hand grenades in supermarkets, our USDA microbiologist disagrees, right? The consumer has the most responsibility, but just refuses to accept it. It's like saying, a car company saying, yeah, we installed faulty brakes, but it's your fault for not putting your kid in a seatbelt. The director of the CDC's Foodborne Illness Division responded famously to this kind of blame the victim attitude coming out of the meat industry. She asked a question. Is it reasonable? Is it reasonable that if a consumer undercooks a hamburger, their 3-year-old dies? Not to worry, the meat industry's on it. They just got FDA approval for a bacteria-eating virus to spray on the meat. These so-called bacteriophages attack the food poisoning bacteria, though there have been concerns expressed that these so-called bacteriophages may swap toxin genes between bacteria, especially given the difficulties in preventing large numbers of these bacteria-eating viruses from escaping into the environment from these slaughter plants. It could also allow the meat industry to become even more complacent about food safety, kind of like the quick fix argument about irradiation. I mean, who cares how much fecal matter there is in the meat if you can just blast it with enough radiation at the end to effectively sterilize? We talked about kidney failure. What about liver failure? We have known for decades that you can treat liver failure with a vegetable protein diet to decrease the amount of toxins that would otherwise build up in your bloodstream eating meat without a fully functional liver to detoxify your blood. I do, however, have to admit that there's some who eat plant-based diets with worsening liver function, called alcoholics, living off of potatoes and grapes and barley, strictly plant-based, yet not doing so good. It's not clear what... Next on the list is essential hypertension, or high blood pressure, essentially only found in those that eat meat. Again, something we've known for decades. 74 out of Hopkins. The intake, consumption of food of animal origin, highly significantly associated with blood pressure, again, even after the weight effects are removed. Fast forward 36 years to the Adventist II study, the largest study looking at plant eaters. That found, so for example, compared to those that eat meat, and these were Adventist meat eaters, so actually ate relatively little meat compared to the general population, a really healthy population of meat eaters, compared to them, if instead of eating meat on a daily basis, you just kind of eat meat on a weekly basis, like just a Sunday roast or something, you may drop your risk of having high blood pressure by 23%. Cut out all meat except fish, you're down 38%. Cut out all meat, period, you just cut your risk in half of this leading killer. But it appears one needs to go all the way towards eliminating animal products altogether from one's diet to capture that full 3/4 of the risk tossed out the window because you're eating healthy. Same thing with diabetes. Look at this. The stepwise drop in risk, the more and more plant-based one's diet gets. And again, this is what we saw before with obesity. Anything over 25 is overweight. And again, only the vegans were the only dietary group on average not overweight. How long does it take eating healthy to bring down one's blood pressure? 12 days. This is McDougall in Santa Rosa, California now, who actually trained here in Hawaii, who took 500 meat eaters, put them on a plant-based diet in 12 days. was able to drop their blood pressure 6%. And that's for people who came in with normal blood pressure, came in with high blood pressure, got twice that benefit in less than 2 weeks of eating healthy. Killer number 14 in this country is Parkinson's disease. Does a vegan diet reduce risk for Parkinson's disease? Well, we know that every single forward-looking study ever on dairy product and milk consumption found increased risk for consumers of dairy for getting Parkinson's disease. Why? Well, one possibility is that dairy products in the United States are contaminated with neurotoxic chemicals. We have substantial evidence that shows that exposure to pesticides, for example, may increase Parkinson's risk. We have autopsy studies finding higher levels of these pesticides and pollutants in the brains of Parkinson's patients. And some of these same compounds are found at low levels in dairy products in the United States. And they're talking about chemicals like tetrahydroisoquinoline, which is Parkinsonism-related compound found predominantly in cheese, actually. But even the levels in cheese are not very high. The concern, though, is that these neurotoxins may accumulate in the brain over long periods of consumption. Killer number 15 is so-called aspiration pneumonia, which is caused by swallowing difficulties, which is usually due to stroke or Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all of which we've already covered. So here we go. Here's the top 15 killers in the United States, and a plant-based diet can help prevent nearly all of them, can help treat more than half of them, and even may reverse the progression of disease in some of them, including our top 3 killers. Want to solve the healthcare crisis? I've got a suggestion. So this is the Seventh-day Adventist study, longest running study on vegetarians here in North America, found that compared to vegetarians, those that eat meat, twice the odds of being on aspirin, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antacids, painkillers, blood pressure medications, laxatives, of course, as well as insulin. Right? So plant-based diets are great for people that don't like taking drugs, that don't like paying for drugs, and that don't like risking drug side effects. Now, I do have to note that there are some side effects of plant-based diets. Side effects include fewer chronic diseases, fewer allergies, fewer surgeries, less drugs, fewer hospitalizations. Here's the surgery data. Fewer varicose veins, fewer hemorrhoids, even fewer hysterectomies among women who eat plant-based diets. And in terms of diseases, I'm not just talking about the top killers. I mean, the whole talk, I'm just talking about the leading killers. But look, also less diverticulosis, less rheumatoid arthritis, and most importantly, fewer diseases overall. That's what you get eating a plant-based diet. This is the allergies thing, which I just find fascinating. Compared to vegetarian women, non-vegetarian women have about 30% more chemical allergies, 24% more asthma, more drug allergies, more bee sting allergies, more hay fever. This is the latest side effect of plant-based diets, fewer cataracts. That's what you get, lower risk of cataracts. You can tell this study was done in Europe because the so-called heavy meat eating group, the heavy meat eaters, 1 serving a day or more. Oh, that's the heavy meat eaters. But compared to those, if you just eat a half a serving of meat a day, you just may drop your risk by 15% of getting cataracts. You cut out all meat except fish, you're down 21%, cut out all meat period, down 30%, but appears again one needs to continue to improve one's diet to get the full 40% drop in risk of our leading cause of vision loss in this country. I mean, imagine if we just cut down on animal products. Well, you know, there's actually one country that did. Finland, of all places, after World War II, started packing on the meat, eggs, and dairy. And by the 1970s, the cardiac mortality among Finnish men was the highest in the world, putting us to shame, bumping us to number 2 on the list. Look, they didn't want to die, so they got serious. Right? Well, heart disease caused by high cholesterol caused by high saturated fat intake, and so the main focus of the nationwide strategy reduced the saturated fat intake in the country. Where is saturated fat found? Well, here in the United States, basically cheese and chicken, 2 top sources, donuts then. A berry project was launched to help dairy farmers make a switch to berry farming. And indeed, many farmers did switch from dairies to berries. They even started these friendly cholesterol-lowering competitions between villages to see like whose village could get lower average cholesterol. All right, how did they do? Remarkably great changes took place. What am I talking about? I'm talking about an 80% drop in cardiac mortality across the entire country. 80% heart disease gone. And now, of course, who's muscling in to get our title back? The United States of America. Well, I have a number of videos, a series of videos about conflicts of interest within the Dietary Guidelines Committee, the official committee that writes the federal guidelines for Americans on healthy eating. And whether or not these committee members are funded by candy bar companies, the Sugar Association, some of them are proud members of McDonald's Global Advisory Council on Healthy Lifestyles. Others happen to serve on Coca-Cola's Beverage Institute for Health and Wellness. This one's my favorite. This is Joanna Dwyer, who was with me over at Tufts, who used to be the official Duncan Hines brand girl before she was the official Crisco brand girl, and then went on to write the dietary guidelines for the United States. Right? Now, if you actually read what the committee comes up with, you'll note that there is no discussion at all of the scientific research on the health consequences of eating meat. Everything I talked about, gone. It's not there. Because if the committee actually discussed this research, it would be unable to justify its recommendation to eat meat at all, as the research would show that meat increases the risk of chronic disease, contrary to the whole point of having dietary guidelines in the first place. And so thus, by simply ignoring that research, the committee is able to reach a conclusion that would otherwise look improper. Right? They can't even talk about the science. And let me end with perhaps the best encapsulation of U.S. nutrition policy that I've ever come across. It's actually in a cartoon. Started out, the new dietary guidelines have been released. Right? They tell us to eat healthier, but not so healthy as to noticeably affect any corporate profits. Thank you. Questions? This is a great question. And the question is, where are we going to get phosphatidylcholine? Because you will see egg advertisements, the egg industry, desperate to get you to think about anything except cholesterol. Right? And so at first they came out and said, well, no, you need to eat eggs for your eyesight because eggs contain these two compounds, these two phytonutrients, lutein and zeaxanthin, they're critical for eye health. And then I did a video about that. If you remember, what's it called? Egg industry blind spot, something like that. Basically showed that a single teaspoon of spinach, one spoonful of spinach, has as much of those compounds as 9 eggs. So we're supposed to get like 10,000 units a day. So that's like a third a cup of spinach. That's doable, right? Or 40 eggs, 40 eggs a day, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, okay. So that didn't work out so well. So they're like, what else? Choline. Eggs have choline. Quick, there's like a choline deficiency emergency. It turns out that phosphatidylcholine, found predominantly in eggs, but also chicken, dairy, fish, is converted about this trimethylamine, this compound that's created when you eat red meat from the carnitine. When you eat red meat, it contains carnitine, and your gut bacteria, instead of turning plant compounds into positive things like propionate, it can turn meat compounds into bad toxic compounds like trimethylamine, which is oxidized by our liver and increases our risk of cancer and stroke and heart disease, all sorts of other things. Well, what they didn't say, because that's the new research, but the old research shows that our bacteria does the same thing with phosphatidylcholine. And so all animal products, our own gut bacteria, certain populations of gut bacteria make this trimethylamine. So we don't want to increase our phosphatidylcholine. In fact, that's why we think that egg consumption is associated with lethal prostate cancer risk. We think it's this trimethylamine. But interestingly, they found that if you give vegans a can of Red Bull or one of these energy drinks that have carnitine in it, they don't make any trimethylamine. You can give them carnitine supplements, because they don't have these gut bacteria that produce trimethylamine, right? Because they've been eating lots of fiber. So what do they have in their gut? They selected for all these fiber-eating bacteria, which produce all this great stuff. But meat eaters select for meat-eating bacteria, which produce these toxic compounds. So you give that same Red Bull drink to a meat eater, they make toxic compounds. You give it to a vegan, there's no bad bacteria in there to make those compounds. Really fascinating story. We get all the phosphatidylcholine we need eating a wide variety, so you can get it from legumes, you can get it from nuts and seeds. It's kind of widely found throughout the plant kingdom, but in very small amounts, which is just the small amounts we need without increasing our risk of disease. Yes. Oh, what a great question. The question is, look, I don't eat any of that crap. I don't eat the processed foods. I don't eat meat, eggs, and dairy. But what should I eat? What should I go out of my way to eat every single day? You need to eat not just fruits and vegetables. Not just stuff your face with as many fruits and vegetables as possible. You need to eat the healthiest fruits, berries, every single day. You need to eat the healthiest vegetables, dark green leafy vegetables, every single day. I'd love to see people eat more legumes, beans, peas, lentils, soy, every meal ideally. I have lots of videos coming up about the amazing properties of legumes. And of course, well, it sounds like you're doing everything else. Nuts and seeds. Oh, fungus. So mushrooms, right? People think, mushrooms technically are not plants. So actually, but they have all these wonderful health properties, immune boosting, aromatase enzyme for breast cancer patients, do all sorts of amazing things, anti-inflammatory. Oh, so what are there plant foods we should stay away from, right? So Twinkies are like a plant food, right? Oreo, plant food. Okay. No, but I actually go out of my way to find studies about whole plant foods you should stay away from, because there's so few. I mean, there's wow, I found some nugget. And so, for example, cinnamon. So there's a bad type there's cassia cinnamon, but if you're eating a teaspoon of cinnamon a day, then you want to make sure you're getting Ceylon cinnamon, not cassia cinnamon, which has this compound called coumarin, which may be toxic to one's liver. And then the next, don't eat too much nutmeg. That's a funny story. And then the safety of tarragon. Actually, tarragon, we're a little concerned about the spice tarragon. I wouldn't go overboard on tarragon. Star fruit, have a lot of oxalates, may increase our risk of kidney stones. Spirulina, a nice Hawaii product. Spirulina don't make this neurotoxin called BMAA, but you only find this neurotoxin two places, in the brains of Alzheimer's patients and in spirulina supplements on the retail shelves. You say, wait a second, I thought spirulina doesn't make BMAA. It doesn't, but contaminant blue-green algae do, and it's very difficult to just actually grow spirulina in a way that you don't get contaminating blue-green algae. You can eat chlorella instead, which doesn't have that problem. Oh, kombucha! There's this case series of people ending up in comas in the emergency departments with lactic acidosis. Basically, their blood turned to acid after drinking kombucha. And this is not just homemade, moonshine kombucha, but retail kombucha off the shelves. Now, obviously, this is very rare. It happens very infrequently, but why increase your risk at all by just choosing to drink green tea instead and eating mushrooms separately? So about 1 in 250 people are allergic to soy. For those rare people, maybe 4 out of 1,000 people that are allergic to soy, they should stay away from it. Peanuts are healthy, but if you have a peanut allergy, it could kill you, right? Gluten, right? For the vast majority of people, about 99.3% of people, 122 out of 123 Americans, gluten is fine, but that 1 out of 123 has celiac disease. They eat gluten, they'll live a shorter life, have all sorts of problems, right? And so similar with soy, for the vast majority of people, soy is health promoting. Having said that, there's healthier and less healthy options. So tofu is kind of like the white bread of the soy kingdom. They take a whole soybean, take about half the fiber, half the minerals, and you're left with tofu. But look, soybeans are so incredibly healthy. You can take away half the nutrition, still have a really healthy product. But what about tempeh? You see the individual soybeans, that's a whole soy food. Or miso, or edamame, the whole green immature soybeans themselves. Then you're getting a whole food, and I always encourage people to eat whole foods whenever possible. And if you have marginal iodine intake, If you're not getting enough iodine and eat a lot of soy foods, flax seeds, or cruciferous vegetables, you can actually interfere with your thyroid function. The answer is not to avoid those super healthy foods. The answer is just to get enough iodine. How do you do that? The healthiest way is sea vegetables. And there's no excuse for anyone on this beautiful island not to be able to develop a taste for one sea vegetable that they like. If, however, you absolutely hate seaweed, you can't find any way to make it palatable, then you can get iodine. If you use salt, well, then you use iodized salt. Don't use sea salt, right? Use iodized salt, quarter teaspoon, all the iodine you need. I don't encourage people to add salt to their food, but if you do, I'd use iodized. Otherwise, you can get it in multivitamin. We're talking about 150 micrograms, maybe 3 times a week, all the iodine you need. Soy is even more, the earlier you can start soy, the better. So that's what the breast cancer data shows. Soy consumers have between 30 to 50% lower risk of developing breast cancer. The 30% is if you start eating soy in adulthood. The 50%, cutting your risk in half if in adolescence you start eating soy. So that's really the ideal, but it's never too late to start. And there's been now 4 studies starting in 2007 on breast cancer survivors, split into 2 groups, half eat soy, half don't. And who lives longest? The soy consumers. Women with breast cancer, estrogen receptor positive or negative, whether you're on tamoxifen or not, live longer, lower recurrence rates, and extended survival eating soy compared to not. But having said that, look, if you don't like soy for whatever reason, all the legumes, right? Fine, eat black bean burritos, or eat pea soup, or eat, hummus made out of chickpeas. But we really should try to eat legumes every day. Thank you very much. Oh, and everything I've done is free on my website, nutritionfacts.net.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Greger, for a really wonderful talk that you've given tonight. Compelling and fascinating and clear, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Now, for all the rest of you, we'd like to invite you to join us for some delicious vegan food samples donated by the generosity of Down to Earth. Thank you all for coming tonight. Mahalo.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.